Republicans' so-called big, beautiful bill will effectively place a crown on Donald Trump's head. Buried deep in the Republican bill is a really nasty provision that would strip federal judges of one of their most critical powers, the ability to force their own rulings. In other words, Republicans want to codify into law Donald Trump's attacks on our judicial system. They want to gut our federal courts until they're utterly powerless. They want to buck the Constitution and bulldoze the rule of law. This is dangerous, it's reckless, it's un-American. And it isn't just a policy difference. This is an assault on the rule of law, an assault on the independence of the judiciary, and on the very checks and balances that have defined this country since its inception. So today, I'm announcing that Democrats will fight with every tool we have to stop this provision from becoming law, this evil, un-American provision that flies in the face of the Constitution completely. This provision, as I said, is one of the most direct assaults on the separation of powers in recent memory. It essentially hands the government officials, including Donald Trump, the license to ignore any ruling from a federal judge that they don't like. And it strips the courts of any power to hold people accountable if they violate court orders, including the Supreme Court. Shame on the House of Representatives putting this in, on the Republicans in the House of Representatives. Shame. This is so bad, it's beyond the pale. So, as we all know, one of the most essential things that the judiciary has, its ability to enforce its own orders. That's the authority we've given the judiciary. And this proposal would effectively render judicial rulings meaningless. Just words on paper with no power to hold anyone accountable. Let's call it for what it is. It's the get out of jail free card for Donald Trump. This is the get out of jail free card for Donald Trump. Now, let's see here. This is also a death sentence for judicial independence in America. It's not democracy, it's authoritarianism. It's a move ripped right straight from a playbook of a dictator. And we all know Donald Trump is a would-be dictator. So you have to ask yourself, why now? Why is he doing it now? Well, Donald Trump's losing in court over and over and over again. Our analysis showed that just in the last month, the Trump administration lost a whopping 97% of rulings in federal district courts. And this came from judges across the political spectrum. Many of them were Trump appointees or Bush appointees, including judges that Donald Trump appointed have ruled against him. It drives him crazy that the judges he appointed are actually following the law instead of following his whim, his wish, his desire to be a dictator. So, rather than respect these rulings, as any president before would have done, Trump and his allies want to rewrite the rules to make himself untouchable. And so, congressional Republicans, sadly, in a great tragic day for democracy, are trying to bend their knees and bend the Constitution and bail Donald Trump out by letting him ignore the courts and all these court rulings that have been against him. And listen to this one. One House Republican even admitted at a town hall meeting in his district that he didn't know this provision was in the bill when he voted for it. What about all the other Republicans who voted for it? Republicans in Congress have been happy to roll over and hand the keys of the House and Senate to Donald Trump and unelected billionaires like Elon Musk. And they're allowing them to run this country into the ground. They're allowing the whole sinew, the whole fabric of what America is all about to be ripped apart and upended in a way we have never, ever seen before. The Republicans in the House were so eager to rubber stamp Donald Trump's monstrosity of a bill that they didn't even read all of it. Or worse, some of them read it and then didn't care, because protecting Trump matters more to them than protecting our democracy, than protecting the rule of law, than protecting the Constitution. Because whether it's Trump or Musk or any other corrupt official, Republicans are trying to create a world in which powerful people face no consequences, no matter what they do. That's not democracy. That's oligarchy. No one, not Donald Trump, not Elon Musk, not any crooked politician or billionaire, is above the law. And if Republicans think they can pull a fast one on the American people by slipping this provision into their bill, they've got another thing coming. So we Democrats are here to sound the alarm. We're united. We'll fight like hell using every tool in our toolbox to stop this provision from becoming law. Next is Senator Durbin. Let me just take all my papers here. Richard. Yeah, I got it. Yep, I'll leave it.
Thanks, Chuck Schumer. I want to say a kind word about my colleagues from the Senate Judiciary Committee, Sheldon Whitehouse and Mazie Hirano. Something interesting has happened in that committee in recent times. I've been on the committee long enough to have considered literally hundreds, if not thousands, of nominees, and I kind of know the line of questioning that'll be asked of each of the nominee candidates. That's changed. It changed this year. The questions that are being asked are more fundamental to the Constitution. Basic questions like, do you believe the executive is bound by court orders? I wouldn't have thought to ask that in previous years, but I had to ask it this year because the question is whether or not, given a court order, Donald Trump or his administration will feel bound to follow it as a rule of law. The questions are asked and the answers are all over the park. The uncertainty of these nominees as to what the president would do when pushed to the limit, where the court is saying to him, you have to stop doing this, or you have to start doing this, or you'll be found in contempt. Donald Trump doesn't like to lose. We know that. He said it over and over again. And he's been losing one court case after another because of his outrageous executive orders. 97%, according to Chuck Schumer, and I don't doubt it, have found against him in the courts and what he's been trying to do. And when he loses, what does he say about the judges? Lunatics, communists. These people hate America. Even the judges that he appointed, for goodness sakes. He's turned on Leonard Leo, his patron for so many years, and called him a sleazebag. You can't keep up with this president when it comes to hurling these invectives. But there's one thing that they did, and they didn't want to make as public a show of it, and that's the provision we're talking about today. In a 1,000-page bill on the budget, they put in a provision to try to make sure that in many cases, Donald Trump can't lose. How do they do this? Well, they say rather if you want to enforce a court order as a plaintiff, enforcing it, for example, a contempt citation, there has to be a security bond filed. Well, of course, what that means is if you didn't put the money up front when you filed the case, it comes to enforcement of the order, they're able to challenge it on this basis. This is another provision by the Trump administration to avoid responsibility, avoid accountability, avoid transparency, and avoid losing. Well, that's no surprise, but why is it important? It's important because it goes to the heart of the Constitution. Article 3 courts are the last recourse when it comes to challenging the executive branch, even the congressional branch. They have to have the power of the Constitution behind them to stand for their decisions and to make those decisions without fear or favor. If this provision is included in here, and I hope it won't be included, it's going to make it extremely difficult to enforce the law, enforce court orders. That's what it's all about. Trump doesn't want to lose, and he's been losing consistently. He hates these judges, but he can't remove them. They're in for life. And now he's decided to change the procedures of the court so that he can't be forced to enforce court orders. That is unacceptable, and it goes to the heart of our constitutional democracy. It's now my pleasure to introduce Judge Gertner.
Yes. Judge Nancy Gertner. She's a retired federal district judge and board member of the Democracy Defenders Fund. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I'll come back here.
I want to say,
the sign's not blowing away.
right,
so I can
right.
Come back here.
Unaccustomed as I am to speaking, which of course is not remotely true. I was a federal judge for 17 years. I was a judge at a very different time. I enforced a $100,000 damage award against the FBI. I ruled in favor of plaintiffs, and I ruled against the government, or I ruled in favor of the government. It depended on the case, and it depended on the context. I felt free to do that, the kind of freedom that this democracy gives to independent judges. If I were wrong, I would be appealed. If I were even wronger, if there's such a word, I would be appealed to the Supreme Court. That's the system. Why is Trump proposing, why are the House Republicans proposing this bill now? It's not because the courts are not doing their job. It's not because of the comments about a nationwide injunction. This has nothing to do with nationwide injunctions. As has been discussed, this has everything to do with the stage that numbers of the cases against Trump are at. Judge Zinnes in Maryland, Judge Boasberg in D.C., Judge Murphy in Boston are on the cusp of contempt proceedings. They have ordered the government to return Abrego Garcia. They've ordered the government not to deport people without due process. And they get dissembling, misrepresentations, ducking, and they are on the cusp of contempt. That's the reason why we're here. The judges, by the way, who have ruled against Trump, it has to be said over and over again. It doesn't matter what party who appointed you, what president appointed you. What Trump has been doing is so far from legal. That's the explanation for his losing record. So this comes at a time when numbers of cases, as I said, are on the cusp of contempt. The contempt power, as the Supreme Court said in 1924, is really essential to the judicial power. If all a judge could do was say, well, this is wrong, thank you very much, and that's it, essentially the third branch would be without any power. The third branch would be an empty branch. The power of contempt is central to that and is exercised very carefully. This provision, first of all, would require that plaintiffs who are seeking injunctions post a bond, require it. That means, go back to the desegregation cases, it would mean that the poor plaintiffs who are bringing cases against school boards who were segregating would have to post a bond way beyond their means. It would mean, it would basically limit access to this very important institution, namely the courts. So this would require a bond. They would require a bond retroactively. So think about the body of civil rights and institutional cases that have been brought that now would be in jeopardy if a retroactive bill were passed. What judges do now is they have the possibility of appointing Rule 65 allows them to post a bond, to require people to post a bond if there's substantial damages in the offing. But typically judges do not do it in constitutional cases where the individual plaintiffs are, as I have described. The provision is, as I said, a direct hit on the court. You cannot use appropriated funds, it says, to enforce your orders. You can't use the marshals to enforce your orders. You can't use your not clear law clerks to enforce your orders. Essentially, it would leave the courts with it as an empty shell. It also, as I said, required a bond which would wipe out much of the civil rights and civil liberties litigation that we have seen. If courts can't compel compliance, there is no justice. There's a famous story about how, you know, if courts have enforced it, courts have come up with this ruling, let them enforce it. They don't have an army. They don't have the means of going out and enforcing it directly. The contempt power is that means. And what this provision would do would be to try to gut it. I've watched my colleagues, as I said, go up to the moment of contempt with great care, trying to get the government to do what the law requires, what the rules that have been appealed and have been supported. And so now we're at a moment where the contempt power is critical. Small wonder that it is being attacked. I think that if this bill is not defeated, this branch will have been transformed, and that would be a tragedy.
Thank you, Judge. The head of our ranking member of our court subcommittee and a great leader on this issue, Sheldon Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chuck. It's a great honor to follow Judge Gertner to this podium. My message is that this provision in the reconciliation bill has to be understood in the context of a campaign, an orchestrated and coordinated campaign of threats and intimidation against the federal judiciary. This is just one thread of that campaign. If you look at what congressional Republicans are up to, it's not just this bill. It's wanted posters outside their offices with judges' names and faces. It's articles of impeachment filed against judges for decisions they disagree with. It's a hearing called District Judges versus Trump, designed to whip up anti-judiciary animus. It's a bill calling federal judges judicial insurrectionists. And it's echoed over at the White House by Trump's commentary. Trump's attacks include calling judges USA hating, calling them monsters, calling them communists, calling them radical left lunatics who could, quoting him again, very well lead to the destruction of our country. And then for good measure, his White House throws in an official statement calling judges leftist, crazy, unconstitutional people. The third wing of this attack on the judges comes through MAGA, through Elon Musk, and through Laura Loomer, and the X platform, which posts information about judges, posts information about their families. They seem to particularly like to post judges' daughters in order to create attacks on those individual judges. Musk has called them corrupt. He's called them radical. He's called them evil. At the moment, one of the tricks of this campaign of threat and intimidation is to send two judges and to their families unsolicited pizza deliveries, often in the name of the murdered son of a federal judge, saying to them, we know where you live, this is about intimidating you, and we are capable of violence. X has curated over years a horde of what I call flying monkeys. Disordered people who, when provoked and triggered by Musk, by Loomer, by X, will do the job of delivering vile and violent threats against the target. And that has caused the judges to have to take this bar more seriously. Justice Roberts had to make an uncharacteristic public statement saying, if you think we're wrong, appeal, don't threaten impeachment. He did that because he was getting pressure from district judges who were feeling left hung out to dry in this atmosphere of threat and intimidation. The judges through the Judicial Conference have had to create a judicial security and independence task force to deal with this campaign of threats. And the question we're about to face is whether the MAGA Attorney General, Pam Bondi, in the face of this campaign of threat and intimidation, will allow the Marshal Service to do its work of investigating those crimes. Not only investigating those crimes, but investigating those who are orchestrating and coordinating that campaign of threats. If, in fact, as all the evidence suggests, that campaign leads back to MAGA, then Bondi has every incentive to squelch these investigations. So keep a sharp eye out for her. We're up to 162 threats now. If that's not a campaign, if that's not predication for these investigations, I do not know what is.
Thank you. And now we have Mr. Zamore, Mike Zamore from the ACLU.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Senator. I'm Mike Zamore from the American Civil Liberties Union. For over 100 years, our organization has stood against presidents of both parties to defend the constitutional rights of everyone in this country. And that's because the freedom that all of us count on depends on the government being bound by the law. But now the majority in the House, as we've heard, has snuck a provision in this bill that they quite literally pulled together in the middle of the night that includes, as Senator Schumer said, a get-out-of-jail-free card in some cases to allow the government to ignore court's orders that are intended to stop them from violating the laws and our constitutional rights. One of the very first actions that President Trump took on January 20th after being sworn in was to sign an executive order purporting to edit out of the 14th Amendment birthright citizenship. Within hours, we were in court and won an injunction ensuring that our newest citizens would not have their constitutional rights stripped from them as their very first experience in this life. But the get out of jail free card in this bill would mean that unless plaintiffs have enough money to post a bond, Trump and his cronies could blatantly ignore that injunction and deport newborn babies out of this country. Babies who are U.S. citizens under the words of our Constitution. And they would face no consequences. So maybe the billionaires who infest this administration don't get it, but our constitutional rights do not come with a price tag. Trump and his allies may well be frustrated that we keep beating them in court, as do so many others, but they should think really carefully about this step. Because conservatives were all for courts clipping the wings of administrations and overzealous federal government in other circumstances, say to limit COVID vaccine mandates and other things. The ACLU has sued the Trump administration dozens of times already this year, but we've also sued the Biden administration. We sued the Obama administration. We sued the Clinton administration. We have sued every single administration because governments need to be bound by the law regardless of what party the president is in. This is not a Democrat issue. It's not a Republican issue. This is a democracy issue, as Senator Schumer said. We cannot stand and will not stand for a government that can impose its priorities on the people instead of the other way around. The Senate needs to kill off this provision and ensure that the 4 words carved over the edifice on that building right across the street, the Supreme Court, maintain their meaning. Equal justice under law. Thank you.
Thank you. And now another great member of the Judiciary Committee, Senator Hirono.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here with everyone to point out yet another atrocity that the Republicans have sneaked into this 1,000-plus page bill. The fact is we have a president who does not believe that the rule of law applies to him. He is governing by executive order. Most of them, I would say, are illegal, leading to over 200 lawsuits filed to stop his illegality. The only thing that's standing between him and his illegality are the courts. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. And judges who were appointed by Republicans and Democrats alike have put the question to this administration. You know, judges like things like evidence, facts. They're not just going to roll over and give the president whatever he wants. So, of course, there are dozens and dozens of findings and orders that stymie this president and stop him from continuing his illegality. And, of course, the president doesn't like it. So what do his minions do in the House? They insert a provision that will make it that much harder for these injunctions and other court orders to be enforced. What is the point of holding this administration or this regime accountable if you can't enforce those orders, which is exactly what this provision is meant to do? We can't let them get away with it. We can't let the Republicans get away with it. In their continuing desire to get patted on the head by this president, they will insert a provision that has absolutely nothing to do with the budget. So we need to get this provision out of the bill, but you know, just people should understand this is the kind of thing that this president wants to have done on his behalf. He will attack anybody who can stand up to him, whether they're law firms, whether they're corporations, whether they're colleges and universities. His modus operandi is to attack and try to stymie anybody that stands up to him, and that is why this provision is in this bill, to stop the courts from preventing him from continuing in his illegality. Glad to be here with all of you.
Thank you, Senator Hirono. Questions on this subject? Yes.
Obviously don't agree with the president on this bill, but there was some unique bipartisanship this week with Senator Warren and President Trump. They want to scrap the debt limit. I know you've had discussions with him in the past about potentially doing that. Would you help Republicans do that if President wanted to?
I'm not going to gauge in hypotheticals. Yes.
Suzanne with Bloomberg Law. Thanks for doing this. You mentioned wanting to, use every tool that you guys have at your disposal to block this. Could you elaborate a little bit more on
Yeah,
what
let me
tools
just
you
say,
focus
let me
on
be
using?
clear. If the Senate Republicans go along and include this toxic provision, Senate Democrats will fight to knock it out in the Byrd process. Our message to Republicans is, bring it on. We're going to use every tool in our toolbox to stop it. Okay. Last one.
Leader, is there any concern on your part in the Byrd process? I mean, Thune has shown that he's willing to sort of overrule the parliamentarian on some things. Are you concerned that if there's a ruling that the other side won't go along with that ruling in the Senate?
We believe that they ought to abide by the parliamentarian as had been done by Democratic and Republican leaders for decades. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for joining.